Greetings one and all, Millie Lloyd, it's Old School Gamer 1971 here with a full-on review for Assassin's Creed Syndicate. It's a game I completed a few years ago and had so much fun doing it, so I thought I'd do a review of it. But before we begin, sorry I'm not been really up to date with the channel for the past couple of weeks. I've been quite ill and the heat has not been so good for me. I've been unable to stay awake, so I will be playing catch up for the next week or two. So there'll be a bit of an overload for the next couple of weeks until I do. Anyway, sorry about that and back to the review. Assassin's Creed Syndicate, developed by Ubisoft, is an adventure game that came to the PlayStation 4 in 2015. Assassin's Creed is an action-adventure stealth game franchise developed and published by Ubisoft using the game engine Anvil and its more advanced versions thereof. It's a centuries-old struggle, the present and the past, between the assassins who fight for peace and free will and the Templars who desire peace through control. With some sci-fi stuff chucked in for good measure and characters intertwined with real-world historical events and figures, with sizable embellishments to it all. Ubisoft Quebec was established in 2005 and was created as a computer-generated imagery business to work on movies, eventually closing down in 2011 and reopening that same year as a gaming division. July 2014 it was announced that Ubisoft Quebec would lead the development of an upcoming Assassin's Creed game, which later became Assassin's Creed Syndicate. All previous titles had been made at Ubisoft Montreal, so it was quite a big thing to move the development to the Quebec base. They are now based at Saint Roch neighbourhood of Quebec City. In 1868, the Industrial Revolution is behind us. The Assassin's Brotherhood is all but eradicated in Victorian London. Twins Jacob and Evie Fry leave Crawley for London after some shenanigans and arrive to find a city under a vice-like grip of the Templars, with both the Church and the monarchy having very little power left. Raised as assassins to follow the creed, Jacob and Evie look to take back the city from the Templars' vice-like grip by infiltrating their strongholds and bringing together London's criminal underworld, aided by great figures of the time: Alexander Graham Bell, Charles Darwin, Charles Dickens, Duleep Singh, Karl Marx, Florence Nightingale, Sergeant Frederick Aberline of the Metropolitan Police, and Queen Victoria. You again are seeking an item, save the day, stabby stabby, kill kill your way across London, taking in the sights and sounds of the city along the way. When this was first announced, being from England, I thought, finally, a game for me. Then they announced the Jack the Ripper DLC and I was like, shut up and take me money. Now. The first time I saw the graphics, it did impress me. Now I get that when compared to today's Assassin's Creed it doesn't measure up. However, to me, it still isn't too shabby. It's still my only Assassin's Creed Platinum, as said earlier. The character models are great. You do have to play as both characters throughout the story. It was the city, though, that made my jaw hit the floor. It does look fantastic. It was a London light rather than a full map, but it's filled with alleys, gangs, citizens, unfortunates and stuff to do. The squalor is evident in the East End, maybe not to the degree of how it really was, but more on this later. Looking at this game all these years later, coming on 4 years now, I still see this as graphically accomplished and runs at a pretty fast pace also to boot. sounds alive. The voiceover, whilst heavy, doesn't sound too hammy. It does sound about right. They don't sound like they've all been to the Dick Van Dyke School of Elocution. The main characters on both sides of the fence all sound good and help pull you into the game. As well, they're not irritating in the slightest. This is good, as if you're going to spend well over 20 hours plus on a game, you don't need to be reading subtitles because you've turned the sound off, or just wanting to punch a character in the face because of the way he sounds. With open world games you need a good soundtrack. This is fine with something based in the second half of the 20th century. This was based in the latter part of the 19th century. Jukeboxes, music players and the like were not invented nor available to the common person, if they were. Gramophones was only for the rich. The street lights were gaslit and gave the world an almost alien feeling to it. Back to the sound. Music would be sung by the locals, so the sound is very different to many of the other games in the genre. This is one of the game's many charms and one of the Assassin's Creed series. Also, they always have great orchestration to boot. Right, I need to get something off my chest. It's one of my pet peeves with the Assassin's Creed games, yeah? It's the future/now stuff. This has the mixture right, minimal future stuff. Controls have been tweaked and tightened, which I will admit they needed to be after Unity. It does run very smooth, and negotiating the city does look so damn good, as does the city. The gang thing is also pretty good. Taking over areas of the city and spreading rooks across London is great fun. It's great to see something like this, and I do miss this when it's not in an Assassin's Creed game. And whilst not particularly accurate in every way, as Assassin's Creed games are, the gangs in the East End of London were rife. There were gangs that took to policing the East End as they didn't have no faith in the police. Others were out to make money and extort the little man. The combat in this game is fast and fluid. It's easy to get into, better once you get to grips with it and get to executing those damn enemies. Whilst I was playing Unity, I felt that Assassin's Creed had lost its way. The fiasco that game was when I was playing it. Back in the early days, it was improved eventually by updates. Syndicate, on the other hand, I had felt was a step back in the right direction, and even with the great entries that followed, I still enjoyed this entry into the series. The game engages you from the get-go. The twins combination, they're likeable rogues. They have different playstyles and skill sets. It's about finding the strengths for them both. The city is fantastic. A living, breathing end of the 19th century Victorian London. You start off in the Spitalfields, Whitechapel side of the city. At the time, there was a divide between the social classes and the city itself. There was the rich and there was everyone else. The rest didn't matter in the rich's eyes. You had two separate police forces policing its own side of the city. The city police and the metropolitan police. Again, this is nowhere near as bad as it was, but it is kind of cool that it's at least hinted at here. This makes it easier to get into. Maybe I am a little biased. Yep, I am. This is my favourite city coupled with my favourite era from history. Now this is not perfect, it's all very toned down when compared to the reality of life in the East End. But the city we have here is still a great world to play in. The story is interesting and does have famous people from that era, even if they were nobodies at the time. Some of the people in this game did not become famous until after their death, and I don't just mean the victims. I do feel that there was more planned, but due to lack of sales, the plans changed. I enjoyed this game immensely, and hours turned into days with this game, and it does feel so good returning to this title again, if only for a few hours. So when the DLC trailer dropped, it sold me on the game's DLC. For anyone who knows me, it is the Jack the Ripper DLC thing. The trailer was great and was the cherry on the cake. In total there were 3 pieces of DLC: Jack the Ripper, The Dreadful Crimes and The Last Maharaja. In my opinion, The Dreadful Crimes was the weakest, with Jack the Ripper being the strongest by far. The Dreadful was based on cheap suspense horror thriller novels of the time. There were 10 of these based all over London, with many different people from all walks of life. The Maharaja is about the political side of things, of what was going on with India and England at the time. The Jack the Ripper was just all out fantastic. There is nothing really real about this DLC, but setting and mood really pulls you in. It was a novel way to use the Jack the Ripper name, and you get to play as the Ripper for one short sequence. All the DLC was interesting and adds to an already hefty playtime, which is rather good, as the game was well designed, and certainly I would love to see a return to the city and the characters. This is one of my nearly 100 platinums. This, like other open world games, I miss the old worlds. Saints Row 4, Mad Max, Fallout 4, Far Cry 5 and Assassin's Creed Syndicate makes the top 5. All the great worlds, and I linger on them when I can, like a review or a top 10. Setting is what set me on the path with this game. The landmarks look authentic to the time. Many of them have since been damaged or even destroyed and then rebuilt after 2 world wars. Yet the game stays true to the era and how they look back then. Evie and Jacob have character and feel I play each of them very differently. Evie is best in my opinion. She is stealthy and cunning. Jacob is boisterous and quite mad sometimes, yet likeable at the same time somehow. There is part of me that wishes that a version of this comes out with the new engine, a sequel maybe, but this is a game that brought me back to Ubisoft from the wilderness. Ubisoft are back in London again next year with the fantastic looking Watch Dogs Legion. I had fun with this from the beginning to the end, and certainly look forward to playing every chance I get. Going from the get-go for this video has made me appreciate the game even more. If you don't own this, get it. It may be the most English thing you do today. Just don't look where it's made. So here we are again on Boot Hill. So ends another game on my gaming journey. Please tell me in the comments down below what you are playing. If you haven't already, please subscribe, maybe share and like if you enjoyed the video. There is plenty more content like this on my channel. Bye Millie, bye Lloyd, bye all. Old School Gamer 1971 signing off.